My first reaction to RaceTrac acquiring Potbelly was, wow. But the second reaction a lot of us had in the industry was, that really makes a lot of sense. It brings together two elements that are growing in importance in retail, specifically in C-stores. Great food service with a neighborhood feel. That's going to be what we're going to talk about today. Now is the time when I usually introduce a guest. There is no guest today. So instead, I'm just going to walk through a couple of the things that we saw in the RaceTrac announcement that we thought was worth sharing. And normally when we have guests, what we do is we talk about things that are big picture and may have a shelf life that's weeks, months, years, etc. For something like this, we're recording it the day after the announcement with RaceTrac. And we wanted to provide something that was of the moment and share with you as quickly as we could. So I want to walk through three trends that I see that are behind this deal. And there's obviously more, and we're going to learn more as this comes out. But three things that I thought are worth sharing. One is this really speaks to the growth of food service within our industry. Number two, the growth of the hangout. Changing the dynamic a little from you have to be fast to you really have to be fast, but you can also be a hangout. And number three, I think this kind of shows a little bit of a difference between what C-stores are doing for food and what QSRs are doing for food. And I don't mean the food, I mean how they give it to their customers. And that's the third point that I'd like to talk about today. So before we get to those 3 points, I want to give you some context if you haven't seen the news stories. RaceTrac bought Potbelly. I've been to both of these stores, so I have a little bit of context for how they operate. Potbelly, there's a Potbelly right down the street from the NACS office. They have great food. My favorite, I've learned this from somebody else in the office. I get the chicken salad and I get hot mustard on it with hot peppers, which is totally different. You'd think you'd want to get mayonnaise, but anyway. More about me than you want to know. They also have great milkshakes, but really good food. They have about 445 stores right now, and their CEO has said they want to get to about 2,000 stores. Meanwhile, and by the way, they started out in a antique store. Somebody started making sandwiches. I guess there was a Potbelly stove around, something like that, and voila, they went from an antique store to known for food service. I guess you could think about RaceTrac the same kind of way. They started out selling fuel, and now they're known for food service and a whole bunch of things besides fuel. But RaceTrac's 91 years old, and they have more than 800 RaceTrac convenience stores or Raceways. That's their other brand. And last year, or 2 years ago, they purchased Gulf Oil. So they have about 1,200 Gulf Oil branded stations. So I guess technically you have 2,000 Raceways, RaceTrac's, and Gulf Oils. Potbelly wants to get to 2,000. The math works, but that's not how these companies are going to do it. There has been a lot of talk about how there's going to be some independence, but I'll get to that in looking at some of the things that might play out with RaceTrac. And that said, might play out. I don't have insider information. I have not talked personally to anybody at RaceTrac about this, and could be quite wrong on this. But instead, let's look at some of those trends that I think are driving this transaction and why we might see future transactions like that. Number one, as I said, the growth of food service in our industry has been absolutely spectacular. We look at NACS State of the Industry data for in-store sales. What percent of sales are food service? And food service is prepared items. It is prepared beverages, the kind of beverages that you'd have in a restaurant. So that's coffee and fountain that you'd also see in some sort of restaurant experience. But food service is largely food prepared on site. That is 75% of the food service category within convenience stores. Right now, the latest year, according to NACS State of the Industry data, is food service is 27.7% of in-store dollars. So more than $1 out of $4 in a convenience store is now spent on food service. Let's compare that to 20 years ago. 20 years ago, 2004, 11.9% of in-store sales in convenience stores came from food service. So the percentage of food service sales within the convenience store has more than doubled. And I know it's a podcast. You're not supposed to be big on numbers, but I'll give you numbers in that growth. This is based, again, on the percentage of in-store sales. 2004, convenience store in-store sales, 11.9%. 5 years later, jumped up in 2019 to 17.4%. 5 years later, jumped up to 19% by the year 2014. Then 5 years after that, in 2019, it jumped over 20% to 21.9%. And as I said, latest year we have data on, which is 2024, it's now 27.7%. And this 20-year evolution is because of a lot of things. It's because of a lot of work that stores have done in telling their story, a lot of work that NACS and other advocates for the industry have done in telling that story. A couple of weeks ago, we had on Stafford Shurden, who has Gas Station Tailgate Review, and we talked about his new book. And by the way, it is a number one Amazon bestseller, and maybe some of you listened to this, bought his book, and that helped it jump to the top of Amazon for a long enough period of time where Stafford can say, I am a number one Amazon bestseller. But he's gone out and he's visited hundreds of convenience stores, bragged about the food, shared stories about the food. So it's us telling our story, and that has really played out. We also have done NACS consumer surveys. We've had Adam Rosenblatt on a number of podcasts looking at some of the NACS consumer surveys. And what we found in our latest survey, and we talked about this, is 1 in 5 convenience store customers, 21%, said the last time they went inside a convenience store, they purchased a sandwich or meal. Now, this is based on survey data that was taken earlier this year. This doesn't line up to the recent lottery jackpot. That was much more likely. Everybody's buying a lottery ticket. So, this is a moment in time that was less chaotic, where there wasn't a whole lot of lottery purchases. But want to walk through, I mentioned that there's been a lot of work in the industry in telling their story. There's also been a lot of great news reports that amplify what is working. And I want to throw a couple out there that you may have seen over the past year. First off, late last year, Marketplace did an article. And one of the lines that I thought was worth sharing was, you're increasingly seeing the C-store industry move from the gas station that, oh, by the way, had food, to a restaurant that, oh, by the way, has the opportunity for a fill-up or a charge. So that speaks to some of the things that I think RaceTrac and others are looking at, going from that fueling experience to going to that food experience. A month after that story, the Associated Press, which is the outlet where I believe their tagline is, a billion people a day read a story in the Associated Press. And they had a story that focused on convenience store food. One line that I thought was great was, by tempting customers' palates with fresh deli sandwiches and build-your-own burgers, the humble food marts want to become an alternative to fast food restaurants for busy Americans who crave easy, interesting, and less expensive eating options. And obviously that last line, less expensive eating options, applies to the period we are in now, where people are seeking out value. They're still concerned about inflation. Budgets are tight. There's a lot of uncertainty in the economy. So convenience stores are in a really nice place in food service. Those are some national stories. Now, over the past week, there's been some pretty amazing stories about convenience store food in the world. And one of them was in a Washington Post article, September 8th, called How Taiwan Took the American Convenience Store and Turbocharged It. And one line was, for many Taiwanese, convenience stores feel like an extension of home. Children head to the convenience stores after school to do their homework before their parents finish work. Young professionals living on their own rely on them for meals and errands. Retirees gather there for coffee and conversation. When all else is closed during ferocious typhoons, convenience stores remain open. Similar timeline. Also this week, September 9th, the New York Times had an article, Why 7-Eleven and Other Stores in Japan Are So Special. And here's a line. And in Japan, C-stores are open and willing to go the extra mile and provide a safe space. People feel a certain sense of affinity and a sense of relief when they see these stores, says Harvard professor Dr. Gavin Whitelaw. Third story, another major outlet, Los Angeles Times. This is not this past week. This is 2 weeks ago. Wrote about South Korean stores in an article. And one quote was, like the bodegas of New York, South Korean C-stores have become part of the fabric of contemporary urban life, multifunctional spaces that can be restaurants or coffee shops or bars with microwaves and outdoor seating. So all three of these stories celebrate what's going on around the world with convenience stores, and they align with what we're seeing in the U.S. The difference is in Asia, convenience stores are much more a part of everyday life. Convenience stores need to be because in a lot of these countries, they don't have the giant houses, multiple refrigerators, freezers, things like that. You don't go to Costco and buy a gallon of mayonnaise. You're buying things every day. So it's a convenient culture over there. And what this speaks to, in all these stories, the focus is also on food. But in all three of those stories, it really aligns to the second point that I wanted to raise about this issue, or the purchase of RaceTrac buying Potbelly. It is the growth of the neighborhood hangout. And with convenience stores, yes, you want to be fast. You have to serve people that are in a hurry very quickly. And they still do that. But how do you also provide that hangout time? And in the press release that was sent out about the acquisition, the word neighborhood was used 3 times to describe Potbelly. And if you go to Potbelly, it is very much a hangout. There's decor that is designed to evoke certain feelings on the walls. There's playful language. It's a place that, and they used to have music in the, at least a Potbelly by us. So it's a place to allow people to come in and hang out, maybe spend a little bit more time than they would otherwise. Not quite that Starbucks experience where somebody may camp out for the day, but certainly for an extended period of time. Now, if you think about RaceTrac, they also have that playful image. There's a lot of signage in RaceTrac that is fun. And thinking about the two things in RaceTrac that they're probably most known for, food-wise, you have Swirl World, which is their Froyo program. And who can't smile when you're eating frozen yogurt with all those amazing toppings they have. The other is the Freeze, which is their frozen dispensed beverage. And if you are not familiar with the Freeze, they also have the Freeze where they have a race. Different baseball teams, professional baseball teams have usually some sort of race. Here in DC, it's the Racing Presidents. Other places, it's kielbasa's, pierogies, you name it. At Atlanta Braves games, you have to race the Freeze, and some fan gets a 40-yard head start and then races against a guy dressed in Freeze swag who usually catches up and passes the fan. Google it, because there's one amazing one where some fan thinks he beats the Freeze, winds up not beating the Freeze, and then falling down in humiliation, and then all the announcers laugh at him. So basically, that's what social media is for, watching somebody fail and laughing at them. But anyway, that kind of turbocharged the Freeze into another level of attention. But want to speak to that neighborhood hangout and just the ability where there is more of an opportunity to spend a little bit more time. And we're starting to see that with how convenience stores are differentiating themselves from QSRs. And I don't think most people would call Potbelly a QSR. You'd probably call it a fast casual. There's no drive-through. There's not a super focus on in and out. There's not. It has a different feel from, say, a traditional QSR. But I think what we're also seeing with this acquisition is a change between how QSRs are going to market and how convenience stores are going to market. And a lot of that probably started with a pandemic. And that's really the third point that I want to talk about in this, that might be driving some of this acquisition or a trend behind this acquisition. QSRs right now, about 75% of their business is focused on the drive-through. With the pandemic, they weren't able to really have seating because of spacing and limitations. So that really pushed their focus on drive-through to another level. Now, that can be great if you don't want to get out of your car. It can be great for speed of service, although I've been in plenty of those drive-thrus where it doesn't feel any faster, and it kind of feels like, okay, after they tell you to park on the side and they bring out your stuff and you're waiting, that maybe I could have gotten it faster. And I think there are convenience stores that would definitely say, you come inside, you grab something off the warmer, you grab the drink you want, you can even have a conversation and you're on your way. You can probably do it still faster than some of these drive-through experiences. But I think the big thing with the drive-through, you don't have seating. You're talking to a box where when you pull into the drive-through, you're talking to a box where you may or may not understand any of the words that are being spoken because the speaker is like a $5 speaker. And then you come up and your only interaction with an actual person is somebody hands you a bag. And then it becomes like, is it good or bad service? I don't know. A guy just handed me a bag. And meanwhile, then you pull ahead and it's like, well, this isn't quite right. This isn't quite right. So what is that customer experience? It is talking into a box and then somebody handing you a bag and then you hope that the order's right. And convenience stores, to a great extent, are moving away from that. Yes, they have drive-thrus. Yes, you also want to have that fast transaction or speed at whatever speed the customer wants. But you're seeing more convenience stores adding seating, while QSRs are getting rid of seating. And you have places like Rutter's, which will feature in Ideas to Go, which will be seen at the NAC show, one of their sports lounges, where they have a whole hangout room that's designed to watch sports, to have a couple adult beverages. And so the total opposite of QSRs, which is like, drive around the building, here's your bag, catch you next time. So QSRs, much less of a personal interaction. Convenience stores still own that personal interaction. And with the playfulness that Potbelly has, with the playfulness that RaceTrac has, playing those out, how they move those things along. I don't know how they're going to potentially take some of the food that is with Potbelly and bring that into RaceTrac stores. We've seen other examples where the process takes a considerable amount of time, if they do it, when somebody buys a proprietary food service program and looks to bring it out, potentially bring it out to the acquiring company. So that totally remains to be seen. But going back to the idea of that personal interaction, I think that there's a real opportunity for convenience stores in looking to provide those fresh, quality, value food offers with a personal touch where you're still having a connection with somebody. Even if it's a touchscreen order, you're still talking to somebody in the store. You might be asking them about the lottery. You might be asking about something else. But there's more of that interaction. There's more of that daily conversation. And I think that's still one of the key advantages that convenience stores have, in addition to that operational excellence in understanding fast service with a smile. So going back to the acquisition, really surprising to see a non-traditional food company that is acquired by a convenience store chain. First blush, extremely surprising. But when you look at some of those trends, the growth of food service, how these two companies align with the idea of convenience stores or food also being a hangout place, and then the third being what is that movement that convenience stores are having compared to what QSRs are having. I think those are three trends that are worth watching, and we'll see how this plays out, whether there will be other acquisitions on the horizon that will continue this trend. But very, very interesting developments. We'll try to cover as much as we can in future issues of NACS Daily. We can talk about it on the podcast. We can talk about NACS Magazine. A lot of different areas that will continue to have these conversations, looking at these trends. But looking at the news stories, looking at the sales, looks like convenience stores have a very bright future with what they're doing with food service and what they're doing with that personal engagement that you have with customers every single day. So that's the summary. Those are a couple trends going on. Next week, we'll be back with a guest, and we'll talk about some big picture items that are of interest to everybody in the industry. Till then, thanks for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.